Hello, welcome one and all wherever you may be. It is I, Raynard C. Fox, the eccentric centrist, and today we're doing a bit of an impromptu video on a current incident that happened in my home area of Portland, Oregon. I was in the middle of producing a new video that was covering Germany's anti-desecration flag laws concerning the EU flag and the preference of that over their own and of their own nation's free speech. But this takes precedence given that this incident just happened. There was an Antifa activist killed either earlier today or last night, and this is an ongoing investigation, so the news articles I'm covering may be updated and new information may be produced during, while, and after this video is done. So I will look to audience members and people also covering this incident to keep up updates, as I will do so myself. So we'll start this video with a recent article that was published, let's see, on the 13th, as of today, at about 16:40, I believe, Eastern Time. Portland Antifa activist killed in hit and run, police say. City's anti-fascist group says death of Sean D. Kellier, 23, was not related to fascist activity, and police did not specify a motive. Well, let's look into this and see what we can gather from this article and the other one that I pulled up related to this. A Portland anti-fascist activist was killed in the early hours of Saturday in an apparent hit-and-run near cidery and taproom popular with the city's anarchist left that has been the scene of conflict with right-wing groups. Those right-wing groups, I believe they're going to be specifying probably Patriot Prayer and the Proud Boys. According to the Portland Police Bureau, the car involved was fired upon and crashed into a nearby building. Its occupants fled the scene. Police said in a statement that the 23-year-old victim, Sean D. Kellier, was taken to a local hospital by associates. The Multnomah County Medical Examiner determined the cause of death to be homicide caused by blunt force trauma. Police said homicide squad detectives would investigate and called on witnesses to come forward. Kellier was a prominent participant in anti-fascist and anti-Trump protests in Portland, speaking and marching in opposition to events held by right-wing groups. His active activities occasionally attracted the attention of right-wing bloggers and social media personalities. Rose City Antifa, the city's longest-standing anti-fascist group, said in a tweet addressing Kellier's death that it was not related to fascist activity. So it's nice to see that Portland's Antifa group is already preempting the supposed motives or the proposed suspicions of activity by Kellier himself by saying it was not related to fascist activity, given that they're always being accused by people on my side of the camp in the political spectrum to be fascist activities. Police did not specify a motive as of yet. Reading on, Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler and the Oregon Democratic Party, outside whose building the incident happened, expressed condolences on Twitter. Memorial tributes were laid at the site. 6 men, including Patriot Prayer leader Joey Gibson, are awaiting trial on charges arising from a violent incident at Cider Riot on the 1st of May. In an affidavit in support of Gibson's arrest warrant, Police Officer Brad Calbaugh described the group's approaching Cider Riot in an effort clearly designed to provoke a physical confrontation. Multiple videos of that incident show punches, thrown drinks, and pepper spray being exchanged. One of the men awaiting trial, Ian Kramer, is alleged to have struck a woman with a baton, fracturing her vertebrae. More video appears to show members of the group planning violence ahead of the brawl. Gibson and the other men charged with the riot. Some face felony assault charges. Cider Riot's owner, Abram Goldman Armstrong, has commenced a $1 million lawsuit against Gibson and several others. Goldman's Armstrong lawyer Juan Chavez says his client has been subject to homophobic and anti-Semitic harassment since the lawsuit was filed. So I find it interesting that it does not say who is directing the harassment. Is it Antifa or is it Patriot Prayer? Patriot Prayer does not strike me to be one to incite homophobic harassment. I have seen them carry signs before in their rallies saying, you know, homosexuality is a sin as by God, but they don't actually harass, and I've yet to see them or any incidents where they've actually gone out of their way to harass an individual about homophobia, about homophobic harassment. I've never seen them actually do that. I've seen them carry sign at protests and rallies. So I find it interesting that this lawsuit directed at them specifically, and no harassment by Antifa, but then again, I guess Antifa does hang out at this joint of Armstrong's and likes to hang out there as a local group. It's interesting to me how this is starting to become like an outsider style street brawl incident every time this happens, where you've got these two factions that hang out in Portland that are fighting for Portland territory. It's not like traditional gang style. It's more like greasers versus the Chads kind of brawls going on, whereas you've got the Chads and then you've got the greasers, Antifa, the anarchists, the groups who don't fit in, don't conform, and who are going out of their way to usually start these incidents where Patriot Prayer goes to march and has these legitimate rallies going on, and then Antifa shows up to try and incite violence and stuff at them. And now it seems Patriot Prayers going out of their way to show up to these places that Antifa hangs out with to see, and I'm supposing not actually incite, but not intentionally, but giving Antifa the option to start stuff with them, even though they're just going there to hang out. But now an owner of this bar is apparently filing a lawsuit against them and favoring Antifa instead. Moving on to the second article that I wanted to cover for this episode, from American Thinker, Portland shooting is Antifa descending into gang violence, a question that I think has been on my mind as well as many others within the Portland area and those across the nation, especially those of us who have been face-to-face, if not within the same vicinity, of Antifa's antics and tactics as they are on the street in their counter-protests. Antifa, the far-left pukes, I believe that, I'm pretty sure that was supposed to be punks, who've turned politics into a thug act, especially in Portland, Oregon, is getting itself into some kind of death spiral. Here's a sketchy initial news report about a killing among this bunch from Oregon Public Broadcasting. Portland police say a prominent anti-fascist activist was killed early Saturday outside Cider Riot, a Northeast Portland club and a popular gathering spot for the left-wing protesters. Sean D. Kellier, 23, was hit by an SUV a little after midnight. He had been at the club earlier in the evening. Friends drove him to the hospital where he died. Someone fired shots at the SUV after it hit Kellier, and the vehicle crashed in the headquarters of the Oregon Democratic Party. The hit and run is being investigated as a possible homicide. Here's another report from Oregon Live. Based on the initial reports, it looks like someone ran the 23-year-old down with a vehicle in front of a far-left drinking establishment and then tried to make a run for it. Then someone with a gun in that city where concealed carry is outlaw shot at the fleeing vehicle, prompting it to crash into the local headquarters of the Democratic Party. That's a lot of leftism in a small space. The news reports don't say what happened to the driver, but based on there being no arrests and no reported beatdowns so far either, he seems to have gotten away. How he got away from someone shooting a gun at him raises the question of whether he too had a gun. How did a guy like that get away? Both the public radio station and Oregon Live point a finger to a right-wing group called Patriot Prayer, which had come over to the leftist turf and rumbled with Antifa last May 1st. So, being as that this happened initially before on May 1st with Patriot Prayer rumbling with the Proud Boys and the outsider-style gang beatdowns that have been occurring lately, usually when Antifa shows up to their protests, what we see is automatically a finger being pointed at them when this incident occurs, yet we have no actual suspect other than the person driving the vehicle, who was not identified, and there's not even a description of. Since I know nothing about this group, and since they fought Antifa earlier, it's a reasonable possibility that it could have been one of them, or some other right-wing extremists on a revenge mission, and the cops investigating this are probably considering it. But if so, they would be a clever bunch, and people who engage in street fighting aren't always this way. Their Facebook site is loaded with compassion comments for the victims of the violence and consolations to the young man's mother, who, assuming it's really her, and that's a big if, frequents that board. The group, and it doesn't look like a big one, seems to be focused on some sort of event in Pennsylvania, and another one in Vancouver these days. They did march through Portland on October 6th, pinning the blame on this group thus far seems to be a rush to judgment, or a lack of judgment thereof, given that it's OPB, Oregon Live, Multnomah County News, Portland Mercury. They will always point the finger at the far-right groups first and foremost, regardless of who started what, who threw what explosive, whose protest is whose? At least as likely is the possibility of interscene warfare amongst the Antifas themselves. Kellier, the victim, was identified as an anarchist, which is not the same as a communist or other hard leftists, and leftist groups are well known for their enforcement of political correctness, purges, and struggle sessions amongst themselves. They are actually famous for their interscene internal warfare. Could it have been that? Seems like another possibility. Meanwhile, a vehicular hit is a typical gang activity, and yes, normally targeted at a leader, which Kellier was, so a sort of picture is emerging there on that front too. Kellier had a stage name, Arminio, which gang members have too, and they all like to wear masks. It just raises the question as to whether Antifa has entered a new sort of stage in its development, pure gangsterism coming out of its nasty politics. It is now emerging as a full-blown criminal gang or mafia, fighting amongst its own, if not right-wing gangs for supreme power. We have seen cases where drug dealers have also moved from mere crime to a will to political power, as in the case of Pablo Escobar in the late 1980s and early 1990s in Colombia. We've also seen cases where the opposite has happened, in Colombia again, where communists such as the FARC descended from a communist terrorist will to power and to pure drug gang activity. It happens as secretive groups develop their shtick. It also leaves open the possibility that Antifa is following some sort of FARC-style gang thuggery pattern, and if so, it's hard to not think drug sales might be involved, as was the case with the FARC. I can speak from personal experience, having interacted with the Antifa and members of Antifa who were just coming into the group around the time that Trump was elected, that they do have an involvement with the drug culture here in Portland. They do have an involvement in the underground culture here in Portland, and being as they are left and tend to be very liberal, they're okay with the drug culture regardless of who it affects or who it hurts. And the Antifa members I did know, who I had specific run-ins with when I disagreed with their tactics, did actually deal drugs. So food for thought there, folks. Reading on, what's Portland's drug situation? Pretty bad. The Department of Justice says the black and Hispanic gangs control the wholesale market, but the whites, and Antifa is pretty white, control mid-level and retail pot sales. There's no evidence at this point Antifa is trafficking drugs, but they do seem to be acting suspiciously like a gang, so maybe that's something to watch for. It's a tenuous speculation to be sure, but it's shared to think all this nasty stuff that's coming up with Antifa's name on it all is just random. This is a good point to make, I think, given that Antifa is been descending into a gang style type pattern, which I've seen and which many others have seen, and it's good food for thought, this entire article. I will share a link of it in the description for you all to read, and I would actually take into consideration the evidence that I am putting forth. They're saying that there's no evidence that they are involved in drug market. I'm saying they are, from personal experience and from personal run-ins with them when I was semi-homeless a couple of years prior. So it's just food for thought, folks. I will leave links in the description. I hope you all like this this quick impromptu article. My heart goes out to the family of the victim, regardless of whether he was Antifa. My condolences to his family. I hope they can find some center in their grievance, and that they can find out who did this, because regardless of who it was and whose side they are on, this is wrong behavior. This is not good for political discourse or any kind of discourse for that matter, and there should be no violence coming from either side. Anyways, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. I have just recently gotten a Patreon. It's Raynard C. Fox. You can find me there. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this, and please leave a comment below to tell me what you think, or send me an email if you have an article that you would like me to cover or a specific subject. This has been Raynard C. Fox, and remember, never give an inch and never give up. Thank you all very much, and have a good night.